We were in Canada earlier this year. They're completely invaded. They're gone. Netherlands, gone. Luxembourg, we went there, stayed for almost 2 weeks. That's like 50, not 15, about 50% aliens now. Luxembourg's dead. Banking centers of the world, right?
It's such a tiny country. I mean, how many people can they really let in? It's barely the size of a county in Texas.
Yep. The first time I went there was when I was in the Army and we were training, and I was like, wow, this is a great country. Now you go back, you're like, I wouldn't live here, you know? And I mean, African gangs doing openly owning street corners in downtown Luxembourg City near the train station down there. I mean, openly. I mean, we were there for almost 2 weeks. You know, the Third Army's buried down the road with General Patton, you know? The streets that are named things like, I don't know, Liberty Street or things like that, you know, named after Americans and American help from World War II. But it's gone now. The IOM. And, you know, IOM is that close with the Canadian government. We went to the IOM office in El Salvador, and they are in the same building as the Canadian embassy. We did the same we did the same in Honduras. Same thing with the Canadian embassy, IOM and the Canadian embassy.
So this is like a pipeline. This is like a pipeline to funnel people northward into Canada, into the United States, to change the population, to deliberately change the demographics of the country in a radically short period of time.
I look at exactly. I look at Argentina the way that I look at Panama, the way I look at Netherlands, the way I look at Canada. It's got Canada has massive resources. We just spent more than a month up there as well. And Yellowknife and all these different places, Vancouver, Toronto. They have massive resources, Canada does, right? And now you see Trump just joked, quote unquote, you know, with the governor of Canada. That wasn't a joke. If I'm coming to your country with Masako and we're spending a month there, you should probably put a circle around it on the map, right? And the reason we're in Canada is because we know what's coming, right? And likewise here in Argentina, I see what's coming. This place has a huge pork chop around its neck, has a very small population. Its military was not able to defeat the British in the Falklands, which they call Malvinas. There's stickers everywhere and decals and stuff about, you know, they want Malvinas back, right? The Falklands, right? Some foreign entity is getting the indigenous people here riled up and that sort of thing, which is what they do in Canada, the United States, all over the place, right? Canada, Japan with the Ainu people, and also trying the same with the Okinawan people. Everywhere I go, Thailand, same thing, right? So the bottom line is, I see this is a place very lightly defended with huge resources, and there's big players sniffing around here. I mean, you can read into that what you want. I know what I'm seeing. And they just had the huge dope expo, the cannabis expo. Seriously, intoxicants are the grease of information war. Intoxicants are the very grease of information war, right? That's how you defeat people. You defeat them with weaponized migration and intoxicants. Those are like hitting them with atomic weapons. It just takes longer, right? It takes longer, but you end up taking everything intact.
Michael, I did want to make one comment about our industry, which is the offshoring and internationalization business, which is that for many, many years, Uruguay has been promoted as sort of the Switzerland of South America, a safe haven, if you will, because it shares a border with Argentina, but it's, you know, on the north end of the River Plate. It's very very boring, some people say, but actually a very safe place to bank, and one of the best places for banking in Latin America, along with Panama. But that being said, Uruguay is not immune to what's happening across the borders in either Argentina or especially Brazil. Brazil, you know, has vast resources, maybe the most resources on the continent other than Venezuela's oil reserves, but yet, you know, you see a lot of internal issues there as well, a lot of crime, especially in the north part of the country. The south is, from what I understand, in Brazil is much closer to the Argentine border, is much safer. And, you know, some people are promoting Paraguay because it has super easy residency and as a tax haven. Basically, if you have more than, I think, 120 days out of the year or more than 6 months out of the year, definitely, you know, in Paraguay, then, you know, you become almost a globally tax-free individual. But the question is, for how long, right? If people don't fight for liberty at some point and take their stand down there, how could this all change? I mean, we see that the EU itself is already a major trade partner. South America is becoming very authoritarian. It's already canceled the Romanian election because the Romanian nationalist candidate, who was not even particularly anti-NATO, he was just more neutral towards NATO and the EU, won the vote, won the runoff election, and even his opponent said it's authoritarian. It's so ridiculous what they did. So I'm wondering, on the one hand, Malay's rhetoric is great. He's all about liberty and the individual and whatnot. But I do feel like there's still a missing component to it, which makes Bukele, in my opinion, superior to Malay, which is the role of the family, the importance of God, the importance of having communities that can stand up. We're not all atomized individuals. And if we try to fight this globalist hydra as individuals, then divided we fall. And I think that's a point I really wanted to make for this audience, is that you need community, you need churches, you need God on your side, because you're not going to make it all on your own unless you just want to go, put a tiny house somewhere on a piece of land somewhere in Argentina or Paraguay and hope everybody leaves you alone. Well, maybe that's true. Maybe you will be left alone, especially if you got a big vicious dog. From what I understand, a lot of people do that in Argentina. But how do we, Michael, create these communities of liberty, these lighthouses of liberty in these dark times?
Well, if you play defense, you're definitely going to lose ultimately, because there are people playing big offense games, right? Entire countries are being taken. And again, Trump just directly threatened Trudeau. That was not a joke. That was not an offhanded remark, Governor. That was straight up, right? And China is doing the same with Canada. You have the Sikhs and the Hindus fighting in Canada, and it's going to be also the Indians versus the Chinese.
Yeah, it's reached a point that some Indian migrants are actually telling their relatives, no, don't come here. In fact, some of them are just like, I'm just here to make as much money as I can, and then I'm getting the hell out and moving somewhere else. That's what I'm hearing.
Are Indians telling their relatives that now?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. That's how bad things are getting in some, especially in Toronto, and
that's a fact.
Especially
this is coming from somebody who's of Indian descent. So that's a fact. They're not going to Canada, man. They're trying to get the hell out.
Yeah. Well, that's funny, because we went to Toronto earlier this year, and we went inside the huge mosque there near Brampton. Is that right? And it has the big Hanuman, a giant Hanuman statue. And then down the street, maybe 15 minutes walk, we went down to a giant Sikh temple as well. We went to both, right? And I'm like, because I spent a year in India, right? And another year in Nepal. I'm kind of familiar with a little bit of the politics there. You can clearly see the Khalistan thing. The big fight is going to kick off there in Canada between Sikhs and Hindus.
Right.
And even among the Sikhs itself, the Sikhs are divided between those who are pro-India and understand the historical sin, and this made-up bullshit state called Khalistan, which is you trace the origin of that. It has British intel written all over it. So it's going to be pretty interesting how this is going to play out, especially since the last there was some sort of a Khalistani representative of this fake bullshit made-up fantasy country who got assassinated, and Trudeau blamed it on the Indians, and the Indian government. And
when was that?
That did
2 years ago? When was
that? That was about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Yeah, it was hilarious, man. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it. It's going to pop. It's going to go, because we always bring the wars from home to where we're at. Like Kurds fight Kurds, Kurds fight Turks, Kurds fight Arabs. Everybody fights each other. When Americans came over, or current Americans, when they came over from places like all over Europe, we just brought the fights here. And the next thing you know, some people are, got certain Indian tribes on their side, and others got the, English got them on their side. It's the same thing everywhere you go. We bring our fights to wherever we go. We don't leave them behind.
Right.
Yeah, especially, you've just mentioned Kurds and Turks a moments ago. I think that's likely to be exacerbated now, because it seems like Erdogan is busy rebuilding the new Ottoman Empire. And for a time, Putin has stood out of the way and has decided, I got bigger fish to fry in Ukraine. So, let's see if the Americans and Turks are going to butt heads, because the Americans have been, obviously the Israelis too, have been cultivating these Kurds and trying to create a Syrian Kurdistan out of Syria, especially trying to move further south into the Euphrates Valley area, which is all mostly Sunni Arabs. They don't want to be ruled by Kurds. So, for a time, it seems like there's going to be a bunch of disorder and shifting. But the picture that is emerging, interestingly enough, for those in our audience who do believe in prophecy, is actually lining up quite consistently with some of the prophecies of the Orthodox Christian Athonite elder, Paisos, who said that when he died in 1994, he said one day there will be a new Turkish empire that will arise, but Russia will be a superpower that will be stronger than it and will come down to Constantinople and give it to the Greeks. So I'm not saying that will happen. A lot of people dispute that, but even in Orthodox circles. But I am saying that this is one of those things that has been in the background ever since Russia first intervened in Syria in 2015, and the Turks, as you guys recall, shot down a Russian plane. There's been a lot of conversations about these prophecies in the Greek media and in Orthodox Christian media in particular.
Yeah, I mean, this, as you can see, the box is now shaken. Remember, wars only do a few things predictably. One is they grow. Wars grow. That's, if you always predict that a war will grow, you're going to be amazingly accurate. Your hit to miss is going to be super high. And they grow unpredictably. That's another truism of wars. And they tend to last a lot longer than people expect. So, I mean, those three things, if you predict them, but especially just the first two, wars grow and they grow unpredictably. And wars also take on a life of their own. You can start a war. It's like starting a fire. An arsonist can start a fire in a forest, but then the fire then has its own life. And the fire will do what the fire will do, right? And wars do these as well. This war that's unfolding now is already beyond anybody's specific control. Nobody has the power. No individual has the power to turn it off, right? No, Israel doesn't have the power. United States doesn't have the power. Turkey doesn't have it. No individual country or even few countries have the power to turn it off at this point. It's got a life of its own. Keep in mind, this is all entwined with Ukraine. These are not separate wars. They're all the same. This is the same thing.
Right. I mean, you had this Likud politician, Amir Whiteman or something like that, who was bragging about how supposedly Israel and Ukraine defeated Russia and Assad in Syria. Although he's a big blithering idiot. I mean, he doesn't,
he's a fucking moron.
A lot of people in Israel don't like him because obviously there are still a lot of Israeli Jews who celebrate May 9th Victory Day, whose parents came from the Soviet Union or from, the Soviet republics, who remember that the Banderites slaughtered the Jews in 1941 and 42 in Western Ukraine, in that part of the world. So they don't really like this sort of unholy alliance between Israel and Ukraine right now, even if Zelensky is this sort of Jewish frontman for it, that you still have that World War II Nazi collaborator glorifying element in Ukrainian society, especially in the far western part of the country where they're kind of concentrated, that element. So, in terms of Israel itself, it seems like, Michael, they can't seem to really help themselves. They're just sort of in this expansion arc right now where Netanyahu feels like he's just got to keep the war going for his own political survival and just keep expanding territorially into this vacuum that's been created by the fall of Assad, where now they've got the whole Golan. They've already taken Mount Hermon. For those who don't know in the audience, Mount Hermon is probably actually, I think it's the tallest mountain in the Levant, where basically you've got a view, because I've been there in 2003, in August of 2003, I was actually on the Israeli side of it, the Israeli held Golan Heights side of it, looking down, towards, on the other side of the mountain, they told us you can see Damascus from there. This is really only like 30 miles away. So it's literally like overseeing the capital, and they're already there, and I've seen some of the advanced columns have already reached about 20 miles from the heart of Damascus. So they're very, very close already. And nobody really knows, again, where this is going. What's going to happen? Is the Turkish army going to come down and link up with them and sort of divide the partition of the country, like the way the Allies and the Soviets divided Germany at the end of World War II? or is it going to be just a lot messier in the interim? And nobody really seems to know. As you said, Michael, wars expand out of the control of any specific individual, out of as much as the globalists have their machinations, their, to quote the author of Dune, plans within plans that we see, they are not in control. They're riding the dark horse as well. And the dark horse can cast them off anytime.
Right. And